You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Hello, Colts fans, and welcome to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Joe Hopkins. I am joined by the news-breaking, scoop-delivering Indianapolis Colts insider, Mike Chappell. Mike, busy day today, huh?
Yeah, I got home from Nashville around 1 o'clock in the morning and got a short night's sleep and then wake up to information about this quarterback change. And, yeah, it was, you know, it's news is always interesting with an NFL team. When it involves your quarterback, it's really interesting.
Oh, yeah, definitely helping our website numbers as we speak. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. The Colts are benching Matt Ryan and turning to Sam Ehlinger, the former Texas star, and they say they plan to do so for the rest of the season. Matt Ryan had a grade 2 sprain in his throwing shoulder, but Frank Reich said the change would have happened anyway. Matt Ryan really a very tough season with the Indianapolis Colts. He leads the NFL in interceptions with 9, leads the NFL with 11 fumbles. He's lost 3 of those, so that's 12 turnovers, which also leads the NFL. Opponents have scored 56 points off those turnovers. He's been sacked 24 times, tied for the most, and his offense is averaging just 16 points per game. That's 29th in the NFL. They've scored 20 points or fewer 6 times, 6 of the 7 games this year. And the offense has scored 0 points on their opening drives. All that information found on Matt Ryan or on Mike Chappell's wonderful article. Go check it out on Fox59.com, CBS4.com. They'll be turning to Ehlinger, who leading into the game last week, the Tennessee game, he was moved ahead of Nick Foles on the depth chart. He's a 2021 6th-round pick out of Texas, extremely productive at Texas, and praised for his leadership. Everyone says his intangibles are off the charts, but he's never thrown a pass in the NFL, at least not during the regular season. He played great this past preseason, completed nearly 83% of his passes, 289 yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't believe he had a turnover, 147.8 passer rating. That's nearly perfect. And also he had 6 runs for 71 yards and a touchdown. Big shocking news hitting the Indianapolis Colts. This is something that some people have been calling for a while. Let's see what we have in the young guy. Mike, I want to hear your thoughts and your reaction to the move.
They didn't make this because they wanted to. They made this because they had to. You know, you resist change in the NFL. You certainly resist change at the quarterback position. And you're right. You just go on social media and listen to read all the comments about it's time for Sam. You know, let's see what Sam's got. I don't necessarily want to see what a guy's got who hasn't played. People really like the guy who they don't know much about. I'm not talking Texas. You know, his exploits down there are well documented. But a team that's 3-3-1, which record-wise it's right there. In a lot of regards, they're not that far out of the wild card spot. You know, the division is going to be pretty tough now to get because of what were they 1-3-1 in the division, and they've lost twice to Tennessee. But you could argue any other year that you're right there in the wild card hunt. But you can't look past the play at quarterback, and this was, to me, it is a sign of desperation because they knew they couldn't stick with what they've got. But you're going from what you've got and what you know, including Foles. Keep in mind that if Ryan's not healthy enough to play, which he probably wouldn't have been this week, Frank said he's not going to practice, and so he probably wouldn't have played anyway this week. But normally, that's what you do. That's why Nick Foles is here, to be that stopgap. But they've bounced Ehlinger above him last week, and they've always been high on Ehlinger. The owner, the GM, the coach, all of that. But if I'm a head coach, with this team, and the season's not going well, and you sort of were on the hot seat when it began. The last thing I'd want to do is to put the rest of my season in the hands of a quarterback, no matter how much I like him, who hasn't played. That's just not something you do because you want to. It's because you have to. And we'll see. We'll see. I have low expectations. Maybe they get an initial boost. A lot of times you make a change and you get an initial boost, and then teams kind of get a game plan on you and things level out. But as I mentioned earlier, they couldn't stick with this. They were couldn't continually go down the road of hoping he has a game without, and the sacks are some on him, more on the offensive line, but the mistakes are on him. Largely the mistakes are on him. And this team, very few teams, but this team's not good enough to overcome turnover after turnover after turnover.
Yeah, the offensive line has been horrendous in their own right, and they certainly have not helped out Matt Ryan. But the 2 interceptions were on him. I mean, they just were. It's not like, he was just making poor decisions with the football, especially the second one. I know the pick six. Did we ever get an explanation on the pick six if Paris Campbell was, supposed to turn around? Because he wasn't even looking for the football.
That was not on Paris Campbell. He said on a play like that, when you get pressure, that his job is to know the ball isn't coming to him, so gather as many defenders as he can and take him out of the play. And then it opens up things underneath for somebody else. So once the pressure was there, he knew the ball wasn't coming to him. And they get that free blitzer. And, that's one where Frank Reich tried to take some of the blame by, remember the play before with the non-face mask call on Nyheim Hines, which was totally ridiculous. He yanked him down by his helmet. But Frank said, he was late getting the call in because he was still arguing with the officials. And Ryan said, I should have gotten out of the play, and I didn't know if I had enough time. Well, then call timeout. If you're that concerned with the play, call timeout, or say, okay, you beat us on this play. And like he said, he should have dirted the ball. Just throw it in the ground. He said the one thing he couldn't do was to make a bad play worse, and that's what he did. So that wasn't on Paris. That was on the quarterback. And it's just, it's been, a week after a week after a week. And it's crazy because they're 3-1 because he's engineered 3 fourth quarter comebacks, overtime comebacks. But in a lot of instances, he's helped put him in those holes to come back from. So it was. You could argue they could be 0-7, or I could argue they could be 5-2. But the turnovers are just too much, and that's been the one thing in Frank Reich's career here is ball security. 9 interceptions. That's 2 more than Wentz had last year. And we know what happened with the Wentz experience here. So again, they had to do it, and you just can't keep making the mistakes he had, and we see the result of it.
Speaking of the Wentz experience, it's pretty well documented that was Jim Irsay's call to yank Wentz, bring someone else in, ended up being Matt Ryan. I get a real similar feeling here with Ehlinger that this has Jim Irsay's fingerprints all over it. Just kind of trying to see what the next guy has, a real desperation, because I don't get the sense that, Frank Reich, for all the complaints about him, he's a pretty level guy. And I don't think he would suddenly, within a week span, take the third string quarterback and yank him up to all of a sudden become the starter. Is that the same sense that you get, that this was Jim Irsay's call?
I won't go that far. I'll say that, like you said, his fingerprints are on it. I think the one thing he's really, really tried to do is allow his people in place, his GM and his coach, to run the team, personnel-wise. And Jim Irsay, more than anyone, realizes what happens when an owner is too hands-on. He saw it firsthand with the way his father ran the team. I'm telling you right now, if Bob Irsay was running this team right now, there would be at least a new coach. He would have cleaned house earlier. Jim Irsay doesn't want to do that. at the same time, I do think he's one of them that really is intrigued by Ehlinger. I think Chris Ballard is too. I really do. And again, I said at some level Frank is too, but not to the extent that he wants to see it with maybe his job hanging in the balance. But they need to find out. We can get into it a little bit, but they've got to get off this quarterback carousel. They just have to. It's 5 in 5 years with Frank. You know, Phillip Rivers worked for a year. They hoped for more. Wentz didn't work. They had hoped that Matt Ryan would work for a couple years at least. But next year, you're the draft guy, and from every indication, it's going to be a decent year for quarterbacks in the draft. And they have got to – there's got to be somebody in the draft that they like. There just has to be. And we were talking in the press room about, well, you know, it could be pretty expensive to move up. Maybe you have to give up this, that, and the other. And the consensus is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it costs to move up, because until you get the quarterback fixed, nothing else matters, and we've seen that. So they're going to have to use the draft next year, regardless what they do with Matt Ryan. And he's got another year in his contract, but whatever you do with Ryan, you've got to fix the quarterback long term. And that's one, again, as I may have mentioned, that's one of the things getting a good look at Ehlinger does. Is he part of the future, or is he a career backup? You don't know. So you've got to find out. This is not the way I would want to find out about Sam Ehlinger, because so much is on the line. But they've got to get this thing solved next offseason with a quarterback of the future, whomever that might be.
Yeah, let's talk about how this plays out for the rest of the season. You know, they say they're going to stick with Ehlinger even when Matt Ryan's shoulder is healed. They said the injury did not play into the decision. Even if Matt Ryan was healthy, Ehlinger would be the guy. To me, excuse me, it's kind of, for a team that, in my eyes, is going nowhere. I mean, going nowhere under Matt Ryan. This is not working. The offense is clearly not working. And as good as the defense has played, you need to score points to win games. To me, this is kind of, in what looks like might become a lost season, a win-win, in that you get to see what the young guy has, and if he's good, terrific. You got a good young quarterback on a rookie contract that you can go into next year with, and maybe you don't have to mortgage the future to trade up for a guy. If he's bad, you get a higher draft pick, and then you don't have to, give up as much. You don't have as far to go to trade up and get a franchise-level quarterback. So I came into work today just really, I guess, hopeless would be the word about the Colts season after watching that performance from Matt Ryan and the offense. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden I have all this hope that they're going to do all these great things, but I have something to look forward to now on Sunday in how is Ehlinger going to play? He is the unknown. I get he's a 6th-round pick who's never thrown a pass in the NFL in his life. But to me, that's more exciting than, oh boy, we get to go watch Matt Ryan walk out there and throw 2 more interceptions into the defender's chest. Is that how you look at it, or do you think there's less upside with Ehlinger? I think there's a chance that he could be a decent quarterback. I think it's unlikely, but the chance is there.
There is, and I just, again, if I'm Frank Reich, Chris Ballard, I won't get into that, but if I'm Frank Reich, or I'm one of the veteran defensive guys, or even the receivers, the unknown isn't my friend. But I understand what you're saying, and again, they've got to find out. In the fan base that we talked about, they're eager to see Sam. Well, let's check back with me in late November or early December when they're headed to 4-12-1 or 5-11-1 or whatever, and
That'd be
tell
great.
me tell me if you're still. I understand, but that's asking the fan base that's been irritated over the last couple of years to wait and to trust that this year they're going to get it fixed. You're exactly right. The worse they are, the better their options to fix the position, because it will cost you less to move up. the worse you are, or the higher you are in the draft, meaning the lower your pick, the easier it is to not give up an arm and a leg, maybe just an arm. But it's those growing pains could be severe if Sam Ehlinger is not ready for the role, and we don't know that. So I understand the optimism. I tend to know. I've been around where they've searched. I was here for the transitioning from Peyton Manning, and that year was awful. It was absolutely awful. Now, the end result was outstanding with Andrew Luck, but we'll see. We'll see. It's again. My default is they couldn't stick with what they were doing. You just couldn't do it. At some point, you would lose the team. At some point, the defense is going to start saying, "Hey, how about some doggone help? We hold Tennessee to 4 field goals and 200 and whatever it was, 20 yards, whatever it was, and we can't win. If you hold a team in today's NFL to 4 field goals, you ought to win by 2 touchdowns, not lose by 9 points." So I hope you're just as enthusiastic in December when this doesn't work as you are now. But I totally understand what you're saying, because I just don't see, after Sunday, I don't see how this team had, and Frank got up there after the game and said, he said, not looking for silver lines, but we're 3-3-1. He said it 3 times. We're 3-3-1, and things are still there. And again, if you look at the wild card race, they're right there. They're only like a game out of a wild card spot. But you can't compete in the NFL scoring 16 points. Can't do it. So for you and everyone else that loves the unknown, enjoy the next 2 months. The unknown makes me nervous.
I would just say the worst thing the Colts could be this year is mediocre. I mean, if they finish 8-1, that is the worst case scenario to me. I would rather the Colts not win another game for the rest of the year and then go into the draft and be able to get their new guy. Because like you just said a few minutes ago, until they get that guy, nothing matters. And I think Matt Ryan probably would have finished the season 8-1 or 7-9-1 or whatever it is, because again, as you stated, he led them on several comebacks to get those wins this year. He has enough in the tank to be good enough just to win you a few games, but not good enough to get you to where you want to go. And he's just not the answer. And I think whoever made the call on this decision, maybe it was a group decision, but when you look at it as a franchise, I think they decided being mediocre this year and 8-1 is the worst case scenario. We either need to, I don't want to call it tanking, because there is actual hope and optimism around Ehlinger. It's not like they're just it's not like they signed me and just going to throw me out to the wolves and say, go ahead, tank, don't win another game. But I really do think this is the best thing for the Colts, because either it's going to result in a bunch of losses, which will result in a high draft pick, which the Colts need to get their new quarterback, or Sam Ehlinger surprises the world, or at least surprises everyone outside of Texas and Indiana, and puts together a good season, and you might have something there. Every once in a while, there's some talent that comes out of the late rounds at quarterback. Extremely rare, extremely against all odds. But either one of those two scenarios, in my view, is infinitely better than sticking with Matt Ryan and finishing the season around 500 and then still not having any real way to find that franchise quarterback. I was, probably riding my tricycle and sucking on my thumb when the year before Peyton Manning happened back in the 97 season. But I do remember the season leading into Andrew Luck, and it had to be close to as terrible. I think they won 2 games all year when Dana Orlowski finally came in for Curtis Painter, and that was a rough year. But boy, was it worth it when the Colts got Luck, and they were able to really, really become, what looked like long-term contenders for a few seasons before Luck decided to hang it up.
Yeah, one thing, you're right. This league does not reward mediocrity. It doesn't. You've got to be, if you're going to be bad, because it just doesn't award 8-8-1 or 9-8, whatever. One thing that Frank Reich said that was really telling and true is when he talked to Matt Ryan today. He told him that, we failed you. At some level, it's on Ryan. He's the one making the decisions during the game. But he said, we failed you because we promised you were coming to a team with a top-tier offensive line and a top-tier running attack. So Ryan didn't have to come in here and throw for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. It was be more than a game manager, but this wasn't on you. And as it turns out, the offensive lines have just been atrocious. We mentioned the highest paid offensive line, and they've had a different combination now for like 4 games. And that's on the Colts. And it's also on the 3 holdover guy incumbents, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith not playing well enough, consistently enough. And then you didn't get left tackle fixed. Right guard was a mess. And because of all of that, the running game is they're like 29th in the league in rushing. So it at least they admitted the fact that, hey, we didn't help you out. But we kind of saw they've turned a 37-year-old Matt Ryan, who might play well behind a well offensive line in the running game, into a 37-year-old guy who looks like he's 45.
Yeah. Yeah, they really did. And, I could spend a whole other episode on the regression of the offensive line, not just the holes that weren't addressed, but Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, or Ryan Kelly not playing up to their level of expectation or their contracts or any of that. How Chris Strasser, the offensive line coach, still has a job is beyond me. When I heard there was an announcement coming up today, that was one of the things that crossed my mind is, are they going to fire the offensive line coach? Because that's not been good enough either, and I have not really seen much accountability towards that. I get it. Matt Pryor not playing well is not a big surprise. He was a 6th-round pick for a reason. They acquired him for very little for a reason.
He had one career start at left tackle for a reason.
Exactly. Danny Pinter was a 5th-round pick. Those guys not playing well is not a surprise. What is a surprise is the just boatloads of money sunk into 3 men who are failing the Colts and failing Matt Ryan, failing this team, failing Frank Reich, who, boy, if he's still the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts after this year, I won't know how. I really won't. And I like Frank Reich. But it's like I said, we could spend a whole podcast on the offensive line alone. Today, we're going to focus mostly on quarterback. We will do a slight game recap, talk about the Titans-Colts game that led to this move briefly in just a moment. But first, I want to finish this quarterback discussion by talking about Matt Ryan's contract, because by all means, it looks like his time as the starting quarterback in Indianapolis is over. The Colts traded for him. He had 2 years left on his deal. Roughly, I want to say $50 million around that.
55, 56.
55, 56. I looked it up. According to SpotRack, Ryan has a $35 million cap hit next year. If he's released, the Colts save $17 million and have $18 million in dead cap. If he's traded, they save $29 million and still have $6 million in dead cap. Good luck trying to trade the guy. Washington's already got Carson Wentz. They're not going to be able to trade with Washington again. So I don't know who's going to trade for Matt Ryan after, he's looked how he's looked this year and going to be 38 next year. But I just wanted to provide the details on Matt Ryan's contract because it certainly looks like his time in Indianapolis is up. And if barring something unforeseen, it looks like the Colts are going to have to eat $18 million of his contract next year.
And they will. They will. I mean, it's a lot of money. But if that's where they go, and again, it is hard to see them bringing Ryan back for next year, really regardless of how Sam Ehlinger looks. So, maybe they just put push the total reset button at quarterback next year and live with the consequences.
Yeah, I think it's time for a reset button for this entire franchise, really. I mean, we can talk in the offseason about what guys need to stay and be pillars for the future and what guys you can let go or trade away for draft picks or what. But for right now, it looks like this is the beginning of the reboot for the Indianapolis Colts. Mike, any last thoughts on the quarterback situation before we get to the game recap?
Nope. I think we summed it up pretty well.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and keep this recap brief here. This is what was the last straw in Matt Ryan being benched by the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts 3-2-1 heading into Tennessee, who is 3-2. And if they win this game, the Colts are on top of the AFC South. Both teams coming into this one on multi-game winning streaks. Colts without Shaq Leonard and Kwity Paye, but Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines are back. So in theory, running game should be a little bit better. After a pair of punts to start the game, Tennessee drives deep into Colts territory, and the Titans coming into the week were the top team in the NFL in scoring touchdowns in the red zone. But the Colts defense was able to hold. Tennessee settles for a 27-yard field goal, and it's 3-0 Titans. After a pair of punts, the Colts are now driving and hoping to take the lead. First down at Tennessee's 26. Colts hand it to Hines, who gets yanked down by his face mask. No call. Everyone in the stadium saw the face mask penalty except for the referees, who kept the flags in their pocket. It's a 2-yard loss. Frank Wright livid at the official. Second down now, empty backfield. Matt Ryan is blitzed, throws it quickly to Paris Campbell, who's not even looking for the ball. It's picked off and returned 70-some yards for a touchdown. And just like that, it's 10-0 Titans. Mike, this disaster of a play would really be the difference in the game.
And again, we've talked about that. That's been the problem. It's just not interceptions. It's shock plays to where, in this case, they scored right away. But again, giving up 56 points on his turnovers, it just makes it so difficult that you can't minimize or you can't limit the damage. And as I said ad nauseum, this team's not good enough to overcome these kind of mistakes.
They are not, because they tried to overcome it on the very next drive, working their way down the field once again. 3rd and 3 at Tennessee's 38. Matt Ryan hangs in the pocket, appears to trip as he throws. The ball goes right to the Titans. Second interception in as many drives. The Titans would score a field goal off of that turnover. The next 3 drives end in punts. Colts' only offensive success came midway through the third quarter when they put together a 12-play, 58-yard drive that ended with a Paris Campbell touchdown. Campbell had a nice day, 10 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown. The teams, Titans and Colts, mustered up a few more field goals, but really defense dominated in this one. On the Colts' final drive, down by 9 points late in the fourth quarter, Michael Pittman Jr. fumbled the ball away, and that would do it. Final score at 19-10. Tennessee's 10 points off of turnovers were the difference in the ball game. Time for takeaways now, and I'm sure you could have guessed the first one. The passing game we saw against the Jaguars was a fluke. Matt Ryan against Tennessee, 33 of 44 for 243 yards. That's just 5.5 yards per attempt. He had the 1 touchdown, the 2 interceptions, 3 sacks, passer rating of 76.2. Both interceptions, like I noted, came in Tennessee territory. 20-yard completion to Alec Pierce was the longest offensive play of the game. 1 week after we saw them make big play after big play against Jacksonville, that looked impossible against the Titans on Sunday.
One thing about that, Joe, is the Jacksonville game. It wasn't so much chunk plays. It was efficient, and it was underneath 10, 12, 15. If I'm not mistaken, the 40-yard touchdown to Pierce was the longest play. And what I need to see with Ehlinger, I may do a story on it later in the week unless everything is quarterback driven, they have got to get the deep ball, at least the threat of the deep ball in their offense. I mean, they're playing almost in a phone booth now. And, Jacksonville gave them the underneath stuff because they didn't press so much because it was new to them. Tennessee came out and said, no, we're not even going to give you that. And the pass protection doesn't give the quarterback, I don't care who it is, enough time to let routes open up deep downfield. So it's such a bad cycle they're in. And it was Magnet. I think you mentioned he ran average 5.5 yards an attempt against Tennessee. You can't play offense that way. So I don't know how they open things up. Can they get back to where they want to be, a running team with Ehlinger? And I don't know. It's almost like they are pushing the reset on the quarterback position, but are they going to push the reset button on the offense, or what? So, but they've got to get the big play, at least a threat of the big play, back in the passing game that we just haven't seen.
Slight tangent here. I mean, I would love to see the Colts design their offense now that they have Ehlinger to look like the Giants' offense, where the quarterback runs a lot. They don't do anything crazy. They take their shots every once in a while. They get their star running back a few looks out of the Wildcat per game because the quarterback's mobile enough. You can kind of move them off to the side, and the defense has to at least keep, a peripheral vision eyeball on them. If the Giants can do that and make it work with the talent they have on their team, the Colts should be able to as well because the Colts have far more talent. So I would like to see something with that with Ehlinger.
The only difference being that's the Giants' offense, and they've worked on that offense. And for the Colts, it's pretty much throwing away the game plan, the playbook, and starting over. And I don't know that that's something else Frank Reich wants to do. But again, it's players, not plays, and you have to tailor your offense around your players. And getting outside the pocket and moving some is one of Sam Ehlinger's strengths.
Yeah, something that was not a strength on Sunday. Matt Hawk played like Matt Hack. He shanked several punts. He had punts of 32, 29, 27, and 28 yards. He did have a 60-yarder, but went out of the end zone for a touchback. 0 punts downed inside the 20. Mike, this might have been the worst punting performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, on a pretty nice day. I mean, there wasn't like, it was raining and windy. And it was kind of awkward because he was actually gone from the locker room because he just showered and was gone. And he was requested to come back in. I can't tell you the last time that the media requested that a punter come in and talk. He's a stand-up guy. He said, I felt good in warm-ups, and it just, things just didn't go well. But it's not that we needed some reminder that Sanchez was an elite punter, but in a game like 19-10, field position is huge, and he had 2 or 3, maybe 4 opportunities, maybe 5, to really pin him deep, and didn't come close to it.
Yeah, not that it ended up mattering too much in this one, but you pin Tennessee down around their 5-yard line. Never know what can happen, especially with defense playing like that. Let's look on the positive side a little bit. Jonathan Taylor looked good in his return. I mean, this is really the best he's looked since week 1 when he rushed for 160 yards in Houston. But he only had 10 carries, 58 yards. He added another 7 catches for just 27 yards. Most of them weren't necessarily, designed to go to Taylor. It was just Matt Ryan dumping the ball off before he got his head taken off. Deion Jackson, Nyheim Hines had 6 runs for 5 yards combined. Mike, your thoughts on Taylor and, how he performed, but also why not feed him the ball a little more? It was a 1-score, after they scored in the second half, it's a 1-possession game. It's not like they had to pass because they were down by 1 million points. Why not give Taylor more run?
I don't disagree, and I think I tweeted out when it was 16-10, and whatever the time was. Maybe it was 8 minutes to play in the third quarter. I don't remember. But I tweeted out that, in games past, in years past, Frank Reich has even taken pride. Hey, we were behind, but we stuck with the running game. And we stuck with the running game, and then it got going. This was a perfect opportunity for that, which is what Tennessee did. they didn't do anything extravagant. They just leaned on. They got the lead and leaned on Henry. I don't know whether they've so much lost their identity on offense that they couldn't go back to the run. Maybe they simply don't trust the offensive line to line up for 12 plays, a 12-play drive, and just pound somebody. But I thought the same thing. Part of it is they with Taylor coming back after missing 2 games, they didn't call it a pitch count, but they had him on a rotation with Hines and Deion Jackson. And I'd like to have seen more attempts. 7 for 27, like you said, those were almost wasted plays. They were. So I think there was a decision. And Frank said, too, based on last week where they had 80-some plays, they weren't willing to go into the game with the idea that Taylor was going to be out there full-time and be on the field for 60 plays. They weren't willing to do that. In hindsight, I wish they would have gone back to the Colts of old and remembered who they need to be and are built to be, but that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, I'd bet a lot of money that they go back to a running mentality with Ehlinger under quarterback. Final takeaway here, man, I feel bad for this defense because they played great once again. Didn't allow a touchdown, held Tennessee to 254 total yards, and really kept Derrick Henry in check. Yeah, he rushed for 128 yards, but it was on 30 carries. A big chunk of that, I think over 30 yards of that came on the final drive when they were just running out the clock. He also had 3 catches for 10 yards. So as opposed to the first game, he really didn't have those gashing plays in the passing game where they could swing it out to him and he'd gain a bunch of yards. Mike, it really is a shame to see this kind of defensive effort wasted.
The greatest stat coming out of last night is Grover Stewart had 12 tackles. A nose tackle, had 12 tackles. It's the most by a defensive tackle this year in the league, and the most by a Colts defensive tackle since at least 1994. So it's I think those of us around here have really appreciated Grover. Hopefully that carries over to the league. The problem is with Pro Bowl and All Pro, I think the voters don't differentiate between nose tackle and 3 techniques. So the Aaron Donalds and people like that are going to get the attention, but Grover's having a hell of a year. Yeah,
Grover's having as good a year as anyone on this team, really. Let's go ahead and move to the AFC South. The Colts still second in the division at 3-1. Titans, of course, on top at 4-2. Jaguars are third after a close loss to the Giants, 23-17. They were driving late in the fourth quarter and got down to the 1-yard line. That's as close as you can get without winning. Texans in last place in the AFC South after a 38-20 loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. Mike, to wrap things up here, what is the Colts' best case scenario for the rest of the year? With their division record being what it's being, or being what it is, winning the division seems like it's out of reach. But do you think what percentage chance would you give them for making a wild card spot?
Wow, like 30%. I don't know. And they're right, like I mentioned earlier, they're right there. Record-wise, they're right there. But to be really optimistic, you got to say, and I base my optimism on this. Well, you've just changed your quarterback, and you've got a quarterback who's not played. So and I understand. And Frank mentioned, as I said, Frank mentioned it last night that 3-1, where our things are still there, which he has to say because that's what a coach does. But they've given you absolutely no reason to believe they can do it. And going to the second-year quarterback isn't a white flag. But neither is it a rallying cry that here we go, we're going to get on a run. So, yeah, it's not looking good. I don't see how they win the division. They've never made the playoffs with a losing record in the division. Since 2002. The wild card, maybe the AFC is convoluted enough, but I also think there's enough really good teams that an 8-1, something like that's not going to get in the wild card. There are there's too many good teams that are going to get things right and make a push, and I just don't see this team built to do that now.
Yeah, I don't either. You say 30%. I was going to say 10. Maybe the realistic chance is somewhere in the middle, 20 or 15, something like that. It's not looking good, Colts fans. But you know what would look good? A shiny new quarterback in a Colts uniform next year, drafted high in the 2023 NFL draft. That's where I'm setting my hope and my attention now for the rest of the year. But until then, we will take it step by step, week by week. Dave will join us on Thursday as we preview their game against Washington. Am I correct, Mike?
Yeah, and it won't be Matt Ryan against Carson Wentz.
Boy, how things change quickly in the NFL. Washington coming off of a win against the Packers where Taylor Heineke goes into Lambeau and gets the W. Because it's hard to score a lot of points if you don't have good wide receivers, but apparently no one ever told the Packers that.
Yeah, and we can sort of ease the Colts, the fan base's angst, because Tampa Bay's a dumpster fire now, and so is Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. So there you go. You know, it can be worse other places.
Yeah, I've definitely taken pleasure in watching Tom Brady come out of retirement and just completely fall on his face. And it could be worse. We could be the Denver Broncos, who traded multiple first-round picks for Russell Wilson and have all this tied up in him. His contract is, you think $18 million next year is bad. Take a look at Russell Wilson's contract. And they have a worse record than the Colts. They couldn't even beat the Jets last week after they lost their star running back. So it could always be worse, Colts fans. The Colts, throughout all this, still do not have a losing record. We will be talking on Thursday to see if they can get back to a winning record against Washington. Until then, follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone, where we'll have all the news and notes and comments and updates throughout the week. You can follow Mike specifically at mchappell51. If you feel like it, you can follow me at Roto Street Joe. And please subscribe and download for us. That really helps us out. Thank you so much for listening. And until Thursday, have a great week, Colts fans.